In every great turning point of history, there comes a moment when someone asks a question so powerful, so uncomfortable, that it shakes the foundations of an entire system. Today, in the heart of the Sahel, a region scarred by hunger, war, terrorism, and social collapse, that question does not come from the United Nations, nor from Western human rights agencies, nor from the media that claims to defend global justice. It comes from a young African leader in a landlocked nation fighting for its survival, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. And the question is this: can Africa protect its women? And if not, can Africa ever be free? This is not a symbolic question. It is not political rhetoric. It is a direct challenge to centuries of exploitation, decades of failed policies, and the silent suffering of millions of African women whose lives have been erased by war, poverty, and neglect. For decades, Africa has been told that its progress depends on foreign aid, on military alliances, on development frameworks written in offices thousands of kilometers away. But Traoré argues something far more radical. A nation that cannot defend its women does not deserve to call itself sovereign. This statement is explosive, not because it attacks enemies, but because it attacks a truth Africa has been too afraid to face. Women are the heart of African society, and the heart is breaking. They are the farmers who feed the continent. They are the mothers who raise its future. They are the silent builders of communities. And yet they are also the first to suffer, the first to starve, the first to be displaced, the first to be forgotten. Traoré's message is clear: Africa cannot rise while its women fall. But why him? Why now? And what exactly makes his leadership different? Because unlike many leaders who speak of women's rights, only in conferences or speeches, Traoré's stance is forged in the realities of war, on the front lines of the Sahel conflict, where women carry the heaviest burden. He has seen the burnt villages. He has spoken to the widows. He has walked through camps filled with children who no longer have mothers. He does not see statistics. He sees survivors. He does not speak of gender issues. He speaks of dignity, sovereignty, and liberation. This episode asks the question the world is afraid to ask: is Ibrahim Traoré, the first African leader in a generation, willing and able to fight for Africa's women, not as victims, but as the cornerstone of a new future? This is not a story about one man. It is a story about a continental awakening, about a new political philosophy emerging from the Sahel, about a belief that Africa's rebirth will not come from foreign powers, but from the women who have carried the continent through every storm. And today, we begin the search for the answer. To understand why Ibrahim Traoré has become the unexpected voice for Africa's women, we must first understand the paradox of his rise. He did not emerge from a wealthy elite. He was not groomed in Western academies or diplomatic circles. He is a soldier, forged in dust, hunger, and conflict, who has witnessed firsthand the collapse of Sahelian society from the inside. Traoré comes from a generation that grew up watching their mothers walk miles for water, sell vegetables to pay school fees, and raise families in a world where the state was often absent. He is part of a generation that has seen villages burned, women displaced, and communities destroyed by forces claiming religious, political, or economic motives, but always leaving women to rebuild what remained. This is why his politics do not sound like the polished promises of past leaders. His language is raw, direct, and rooted in lived reality. If our mothers carry the nation on their backs, then the collapse of women is the collapse of the country. Unlike leaders who speak of gender issues as a formality, Traoré positions women at the center of national security, economic development, and sovereignty. He understands something the world repeatedly fails to acknowledge. Women are not a social group, they are the infrastructure of Africa. Food security depends on them. Education depends on them. Social stability depends on them. Even the survival of the Sahel during war depends on them. This is why his vision matters now, because he connects the protection of women with the future of the state itself. Not charity, not humanitarianism, nation building. Before proposing solutions, Traoré does something most leaders never dare to do. He names the real crisis. For decades, governments and international institutions have focused on terrorism, coups, borders, and foreign alliances. But Traoré identifies a deeper, more dangerous conflict: the systematic destruction of women's lives across the Sahel. According to him, Africa is fighting two wars: the visible war, armed groups, drones, airstrikes, military operations; the invisible war, early marriage, displacement, hunger, maternal death, exploitation, and silence. And it is the second war that determines whether nations collapse or survive. Traoré argues that the Sahel crisis is not only about extremist groups or unstable governments. It is the result of generations of structural violence against women, girls taken out of school because villages cannot protect them; mothers dying in childbirth due to destroyed infrastructure; widows raising entire families alone after attacks; women losing access to fields, markets, and water; young women trafficked across the Sahara with no rescue. This is not collateral damage. This is the foundation of instability. Traoré uses a phrase that has shocked many diplomats. If you want to know the true state of a nation, look at its women. If the women are suffering, the country has already fallen. His diagnosis reframes the Sahel entirely. The crisis is not military, it is civilizational. And unless Africa protects its women, no amount of foreign aid, peacekeeping missions, or political reforms will save it. Traoré's argument becomes even more provocative when he addresses the international community. He does not accuse the West of ignorance, he accuses it of selective blindness. For decades, Western governments, NGOs, and media outlets have presented themselves as defenders of human rights. But in the Sahel, their priorities reveal a different truth. They care about terrorism because it threatens global interests. They care about migration because it affects European borders. They care about resources because Africa fuels their industries. But they do not care about the woman carrying her child across the desert after her village burned. Because her suffering does not threaten their security. Her silence does not reach their borders. Her death does not appear in their economic reports. This is why Western media covers military clashes, but ignores mass abductions of women, rape used as a weapon, girls forced into marriage for protection, women dying during childbirth, the collapse of female-led agriculture, trauma that will shape generations. Terrorism makes headlines. Women's suffering does not. Traoré exposes this hypocrisy with a single sentence. When African women suffer, the world calls it culture. When Western women suffer, the world calls it a crisis. This line is not meant to provoke, it is meant to reveal the double standard that has shaped global engagement with Africa for decades. And it is why the world continues to misdiagnose the Sahel. You cannot solve a crisis when you refuse to see the people living at the center of it. If Traoré stopped at criticism, he would be like many African leaders before him. But he goes further. He proposes a new model of nation building, one built on the protection and empowerment of women as the foundation of sovereignty. His vision has three pillars: security through protection of women. Traoré argues that national security begins not with soldiers, but with mothers, farmers, and young girls. If women cannot live without fear, no military victory will last. If women cannot farm, the nation will starve. If women cannot raise children in peace, the next generation will rise damaged. This reframes the Sahel crisis entirely: protecting women, stabilizing the nation. Economic independence. Through women, women produce the majority of food in Burkina Faso and much of West Africa. They run market systems, maintain local supply chains, and sustain informal economies. Traoré's push for local agriculture, agro-processing, land rights, reform, micro-enterprise investment is not simply development policy. It is a strategy to rebuild the economy from the ground up by strengthening the people who already carry it. social transformation through education and dignity. Traoré insists that Africa cannot rise, while girls drop out of school at 12, while early marriage remains common, while maternal deaths are accepted as normal. He frames women's dignity, not as charity, but as the cornerstone of African sovereignty. Because a continent where women are free, educated, and protected is a continent no foreign power can dominate. Vision alone does not change a nation, and Traoré knows this better than anyone. Once a leader declares war on injustice, especially the injustice suffered by women, the next question is always the hardest. Can he turn principles into policy, and policy into real protection on the ground? Because the Sahel is not a normal political environment. It is a region where terrorist groups control huge territories. Millions are displaced. Drought destroys farmland. Borders are porous. Institutions are weak. Foreign interference is constant. Transforming the lives of women in such a context requires more than speeches. It requires infrastructure, security, education, and cultural change, all advancing at the same time. Traoré has begun several steps, reclaiming territory so women can return home. No empowerment program matters if women live under fear. Military operations and local defense units may give communities the breathing room they desperately need. Rebuilding agriculture for female farmers. Women are the backbone of Burkina Faso's food system. Irrigation canals, land access, reform seed programs, and farming equipment could change everything, reasserting control over resources. If Burkina Faso earns more from its gold, manganese, and minerals, it can fund maternal health, girls' education, and rural clinics without depending on foreign donors. Cultural transformation. Here lies the hardest challenge to shift mindsets around early marriage education and women's rights, not through Western pressure, but through African values of dignity, family, and community. Traoré is entering a battlefield far more complex than war, changing how a nation sees its women. In the end, the question that began this episode returns with even greater force. Is Ibrahim Traoré, the first African leader in a generation, truly willing to fight for African women? The truth is this: no leader can change centuries of suffering overnight. No government can protect every woman in a region torn apart by war, drought, and foreign interference. No president can reverse decades of silence, cultural pressure, and systemic injustice in a single term. But Traoré has done something rare, something bold, that sets him apart from the leaders before him. He has named the crisis. He has centered the crisis. He has politicized the crisis. He has refused to treat the suffering of women as background noise. And in politics, naming a truth is the first step toward transforming it. Traoré is not promising Western-style feminism. He is not copying foreign social policies. He is doing something far deeper, rooting the liberation of African women in African sovereignty. He is telling Africa, we cannot be free if our women are not free. We cannot be strong if our mothers are weak. We cannot rise if our daughters fall. This is the beginning of a new doctrine, a philosophy where the future of a nation is measured not by its GDP or its alliances, but by the dignity of its women. And the world is watching. Some fear he is too young. Some fear he is too radical. Some fear he is too honest. But millions of African women, from farmers in Kaya to refugees in Gao, now whisper a different possibility. Maybe this is the leader who finally speaks for us. And that is where episode 2 ends, with a question, a hope, and a challenge. Coming next, episode 3. If women are the key to Africa's future, what would a continent rise built around them actually look like? A vision of a new Africa, shaped by its women, defended by its people.